One also has to realize that as the editor of the Necronomicon, I was subject to some very insistent stalkers. I had to use all sorts of strategies to evade some very amateurish surveillance, even out-and-out harassment. In addition, my political interests and involvements made the situation even more confusing. For example, I was involved in commercial activities in China in the early 1980s, at a time when such activity of necessity included interaction with the military and intelligence organs of that country. There came a time when I did not know who was trying to follow me around Manhattan. Occultists, Chinese agents, fascist priests, or agents of an unfriendly government. My own. This sounds a lot more romantic than the reality, I hasten to insist. Further, I had made the acquaintance of several former U.S. intelligence officers in the course of my career, and this has probably led to some of the disinformation concerning my espionage activities. However, I did drop out of sight of the OTO elements in New York City rather abruptly, but for other reasons. I objected strenuously to the Blue Equinox mentality of the McMurtry faction, finding in it an unhealthy whiff of fascism. I gravitated more to a Liber Oz kind of thelema. I could not imagine how such a gaggle of warmed-over hippies would have embraced the noxious philosophy of the Blue Equinox regulations, so I guess I still harbor an unseemly 60s mindset, unattractive in one of my advanced years, I am sure. This unease was exacerbated by the McMurtry actions concerning the Crowley copyrights and other forms of what I saw as totalitarian behavior. They are also in denial concerning McMurtry and the so-called Solar Lodge scandal, as so capably documented by Koenig, as well as the question of the validity of McMurtry as OHO. So, I am sure that I did not make a mistake in abandoning the OTO in America at the time I did. I had made them an offer, though, at one point, before my disillusionment. They were in some confusion over the validity of their apostolic succession regarding the bishops of the EGC, and I suggested that I could arrange a more valid line for them, thus ensuring that their bishops would be at least as valid in the eyes of the dread Catholic Church as the Eastern Orthodox churches. They came perilously close to accepting. My experience with the order was not entirely negative, though. There were a lot of good people around the OTO in the late 1970s and early 1980s in New York. In fact, I had made a small contribution to the OTO revival in New York City. During the course of promoting the Necronomicon, we also promoted the fledgling OTO Lodge there and encouraged people to attend the Gnostic Masses, which at that time were being held in the back of the Magical Child bookstore in Manhattan. I stumped for the order rather strenuously, though I never joined. We held elaborate book parties and other promotional events to which the order was invited, and at which the order and thelema in general were introduced to the public. Our public at that time consisted of a diverse audience of science fiction enthusiasts, Tolkienoids, Illuminatus, true believers, and various artistic and musical types. Many of these events were held at the infamous Bells of Hell in the West Village. Sadly, it no longer exists, having been replaced over the years by a succession of fern bars. But in those days, it was a comfortable English pub with a large back room where the events were held, and the occult cognoscenti of the time could be found there on most weekends, and some of the less frequently employed most other nights as well. We held events on days of thelemic and pagan importance, such as Beltane, Crowleymas, Rose Kelly's birthday, etc. That was in 1977, 1978, during the time that Mr. Dowling was running the local lodge. It may be Dowling that you are thinking of when you mention a lodge master who became a Christian, although I don't know if the Necronomicon had anything to do with it. He is now the bishop of a distaff branch of Eastern Orthodoxy. And so it goes. I continued to hold classes, gratis, for the order until about 1982 or so, after the transition from the Mata administration to the McMurtry version. These were classes in ceremonial magic, Tantra, Eastern mysticism, even apostolic succession. They were heavily attended, and the atmosphere at the time was positive, cheerful, energetic, and muscular. Discussions were wide-ranging, free-form, and very informative for everyone involved. You would find Kenneth Anger in attendance one day, Quentin Crisp another, and we all felt we were accomplishing something. Then the internal politics began to take over, to become more important than the work, and things went a little sour. As I see it, the problem with the OTO in New York in the early 1980s, as it began to grow exponentially, was simply one of insecurity and, like most organizations going through an insecure phase, they chose the conservative, extreme right approach. There were also people of questionable reputation floating on the periphery of the order, attracted by the light and heat. I, and a few others, very few, felt betrayed by the order's decision to go blue, and we had to sever connections. Shortly thereafter, I found myself in Beijing. For my first few years in China, I left copies of Liber AL everywhere just to see what would happen. No, I did not leave copies of the Necronomicon. That would have been grossly unfair to the poor Chinese. That the Chinese have loosened the strings of their government to the extent that Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou now resemble low-rent versions of Las Vegas more than high-rent versions of Minsk I attribute to the liberating effects of thelemic proselytizing. Just kidding.